Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton of HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, the 10th day. Hard to believe that. The 10th day of January 2022. Time was already flying. A third of the month of January, just about a third gone. Unbelievable. Well, this is the off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. I'm back in the office after going up to New York last week for some lake effect snows. Should have just stayed up there. I wish I could, but I got other things to do and a life outside of weather, and even a life related to weather where there's lots of projects to work on. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I mean, it's still cranking up there in Oswego County. We'll get to that later on in the update. First, though, let's start off with a look at the tropics. After all, this is the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion, even if it is January, and it is hurricane season somewhere, tropical cyclone season somewhere, and that somewhere this go-around would be in the southern hemisphere, in and around Australia here with Tiffany, and this is a new system here. I believe the name is Cody, and Tropical Storm Cody. There's Tropical Depression Tiffany, and let's just zoom in. I'll show you here on the track map from the University of Wisconsin site. Tiffany moving across the peninsula here on the northeast part of Australia, going to cross over the Gulf of Carpentaria, maybe re-strengthening a little bit. Heavy rain producer and all the other effects that come with these tropical systems. You don't often see these in Australia. We don't show you this very often. It's a rare thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it's just not as usual as we see, for example, in the United States. But here you go. There's this system down there. I'll show you satellite animation of it in just a moment. And then back over to the main tracker here from the University of Wisconsin site. A really nice little interactive tracking system they've got. And here is Cody. There's Fiji over here on the right-hand side. And Cody's going to turn off to the south and east with time, so it shouldn't get over towards Australia. No need to worry about that. And you don't have to worry about it in the Fiji Islands either. So no disruption to my Fiji water, which I love so dearly. Inside joke. People that know me, they know I love the Fiji water. But there's the activity there in the vicinity of Australia and the Fiji Islands. Moving again to the south or the west, depending on which track we're looking at there. And in the southern hemisphere, these systems rotate clockwise, the opposite of what we have in the northern hemisphere. So keep that in mind when I show you the satellite in just a moment. Just to give you some geographic reference, Tiffany moving across here. Not only is it the Gulf of Carpentaria, but also referred to as the Arafura Sea, or however you pronounce it. But that's the Gulf of Carpentaria as we know it, generally speaking. And Tiffany across this might regenerate some, but we'll see. I'll show you that it looks like there's some pretty good shear on it. Here are the islands of Fiji, and Tropical Storm Cody is located right in here. And again, it's going to move off to the south and east with time. There's New Zealand. Our good friend Ben Knoll will be keeping an eye on both of these systems. But no concern really from Cody over here just yet. All right, so the satellite animation, first of all, this is Tiffany, and here's the Gulf of Carpentaria right in here. Kind of hard to make it out, but there it is. And you can see that there's definitely some stronger wind coming in from the east. We call that easterly shear, pushing against Tiffany, blowing the storms off to the west. Even in the southern hemisphere, east and west are still the same, as is north and south. It's just the way that the circulation patterns are with high pressure and low pressure. Those are flipped, but the directions are not. I know that sounds weird, doesn't it, that I even have to explain that? But it is moving off to the west across Australia there into the Gulf of Carpentaria, or the Arafura Sea, however you say it there. And some deep convection for sure, but that easterly shear coming in, blasting it, and keeping those thunderstorms from wrapping around. It's kind of disorganized, and so hopefully it'll stay that way. But even if it is disorganized, it'll still produce very heavy rain and some squalls. And, that can produce the same impacts, negative impacts in Australia that would do here in the United States and elsewhere in the Atlantic Basin. All right, so looking at Cody. Cody is also undergoing some shear and kind of disorganized there. There's Fiji, the islands of Fiji right over here on the northeast side of the satellite animation. And the shear coming in from the northwest this time, pushing those thunderstorms away. So it's not just the Atlantic Basin where we have issues with tropical cyclones trying to get organized. We often see that in the Atlantic that a system will be coming along. We're all talking about it, and then it gets sheared, and people say, oh, look at what a mess it is, and so forth and so on. Well, the same thing will happen in the Southern Hemisphere. Not everything blows up into some incredibly powerful and intense cyclone. Some of them do, but not all of them. And this is certainly the case here with Cody. All right, and just a little bit of a tweet showing for you here. Speaking of Cody, Tropical Storm Cody's evolution since the Genesis has been interesting thus far, with tropical cyclogenesis from the monsoon trough. That's just a fancy word for sort of a convergence line of low pressure, trough of low pressure over a large area. I call it like a grapevine, and Cody would be like a big grape that develops off of that grapevine, the trough, and the entanglement with an upper level low. So you have favorable and unfavorable kind of coming together, and then convection near the center collapsed as the two aligned, but the tropical cyclone has been able to erode away the PV, the potential vorticity. It's like a streamer, that's a meteorological term, aloft, allowing for thunderstorms to redevelop. And so, very technical aspect to show you that, yes, Cody has become better organized here. And again, it's interesting the parallels. We see these systems in the Atlantic Basin interact with upper level lows, these potential vorticity streamers, just these areas in the atmosphere where a lot of energy is going on that's negatively affecting tropical systems. And they're not all going to just blow up into very intense storms, like I said just a little bit ago. So this is just a visual representation from that. From another perspective here, from a high schooler, this person right here, TC Alert, high school weather enthusiast, pretty popular, 1,578 followers. I still don't know who this is. I keep saying I'm going to find out, because this person seems to be on top of it, pretty smart in what they tweet. So good job once again pointing this stuff out with Cody. All right, moving on along to what we usually talk about here on the Monday update, and that would be our sea surface temperature anomalies. Remember, anomalies are departure from some kind of a baseline, and in this case, that baseline would be sea surface temperature averages, the departure from average or normal, whatever way you want to look at it. We can generally use that word interchangeably, average and normal. All right, and so the blues are below average or below normal, and the reds and oranges and whatnot are above average. I think that makes sense. And so we can see clearly in the Pacific here along the equator, this La Nina pattern with these cold anomalies still showing up very prominently. And then let's use a different color here so it'll pop better, black, in the Gulf of Mexico. I thought this would cool down a lot more than it did, but it hardly has at all with that big frontal patches that we had. And here we are a week later. This is always a day behind, but it's a week after the big frontal passage. They gave us all the Arctic air, the snarl up of traffic on I-95, and it dropped temperatures even in Florida. And yet the Gulf of Mexico is still running above the long-term average. Main development region out here off the coast of Africa, that's pretty warm relative to the long-term average, out into a pretty good distance of the eastern Atlantic, so that's something to watch. But on the whole, the entire North Atlantic, with the exception of just a few small islands of cold anomalies, the Atlantic is warm and the Pacific is cold in the areas that we watch as that relates to the upcoming hurricane season, now less than 5 months away. And this is the region that we watch the most. This is a really nice graphic put together by one of our graphics folks on the HurricaneTrack team. Tim Melman put this together. Appreciate it, Tim. I know I mentioned that last week. Just want to give you another shout out. But this is the area that we watch the most, this Nino 3.4 area. And then again, it's kind of like a Venn diagram where it combines the Nino 3 area with the Nino 4 area. These are just geographic regions in the Pacific, and this little hatched area is what a lot of us really watch. That seems to control a lot of what happens in the Atlantic Basin when that area of the Pacific is much warmer than average, what we call an El Nino. You get a lot of rising motion. That rising air goes up, it spreads out. For one thing, it has to sink as it comes back down somewhere else, because on this planet, what goes up generally comes back down. And you get a lot of sinking air that can come across the Atlantic here and put the big-time kibosh on tropical development in the Atlantic. That's an El Nino. Well, we don't have an El Nino. We have the opposite of that right now. The La Nina is very much in control in this Nino 3.4 region and really all across this entire area. And that's holding strong, and I don't see that changing too much anytime soon. It's going to gradually moderate probably. And that brings me to this. And now we have 3 of these that I'm going to show you over the last 3 weeks. This was from December 27th. And what are we looking at? Well, this is that same area, that Nino 3.4 region in the roughly the Central Pacific equatorial region. This is the CFS V2, the Climate Forecast System version 2, forecast going out several months, all the way out to the meat of the hurricane season. You can see the dates there, January, April, July, October, the different intervals of time as we go forward. And all those lines there, those are the plumes, the different models, the ensembles there. And let's just look, to make it easy, at the center of it, the median there, the mean, the average. That is this dashed black line that I'm highlighting in yellow. So back in December, at the meat of the hurricane season, it brought us to right at neutral, neither warmer or colder than average, just dead neutral. Then a week later, I showed you this last week, it's changed its tune a little bit, and it was below average during that time. And the threshold for La Nina basically is right here at negative 0.5, and El Nino is typically positive 0.5. And so last week's update had the 3.4 region falling a little bit below the long-term average there. So below the neutral threshold of 0. All right, you understand that? And so cold neutral is what it was showing a week ago. A change from the end of December. Everything's shifting to lower temperatures in the equatorial Pacific as we approach the height of hurricane season for the Atlantic. What about this week? Well, a little bit colder still. So if we go from December to now, that's quite a jump. You have to, and look, it's actually, the overall envelope is much less spread out now than it was back in December. You had a larger spread. You see there, it was a much larger overall envelope in the models, and we look at that when we look at tracks and hurricane tracking, but also just in regular ensemble tracking. The overall guidance envelope is narrower, generally speaking, especially over the next few months. This part is definitely narrower. And the blues, just for what it's worth, these blue lines right here, those are the latest members, and there's quite a few of them that are colder than previous runs. But the bottom line is, at least the CFS V2 for now, and again, we're out to the first third of January, said and gone. We're done. Said and done. It's gone. We have 2/3 of January left. Yes, it's still winter. Yes, this can still change dramatically. But so far, no major flips. It's just gradually getting pulled, the ensemble guidance here from this particular model, that we would have cool neutral to maybe even, and in this particular case, just going by the details here, that is slightly cooler right there than that 0.5 Celsius below average, negative 0.5. So this would still imply a La Nina. That's the bottom line. I could have just said that, but I want to analyze it and break it down and make sure we're all looking at the same thing. As I say often, even without you, my awesome audience on YouTube and Facebook and elsewhere, even without you guys, I would still look at this exact same stuff. I want to make it like we're looking at it together because you comment on it. You send me emails. We discuss it on our Patreon and elsewhere. And it's nice. It's nice to kind of get a group look at what's going on. Storm 2K, the same thing there. I see people discussing my videos, and we're all in this together. We all have an interest in it, and we are seeing the same things. That is quite a change over the last few weeks. All right? Moving on along with actual temperatures, and again, this just blows me away that it is January 10th, and we have a 27 degrees Celsius, which is 81 Fahrenheit, nice tongue of water temperatures, warm water temperatures, inserted into the Gulf of Mexico, injected, whatever you want to call it. And if I broaden out the shot here, let's just pan out a little bit on it, get rid of me there, hopefully. you can really see that. There's 26 Celsius, that's 80 Fahrenheit right there. And then there's that 27. I mean, it's not supposed to be there. It's just not. I have to make that very, very clear. And there's even over here, this one area of 26 Celsius still hanging on. The shelf water cooled off pretty substantially because of that cold air push that came down. But there's something that is continuing this push of deep, warm water into the Gulf of Mexico. That circulation is very strong. And so I'm going to start reaching out to a few people in oceanography and get somebody on. I'm going to do a special update on that. Probably part of our Hurricane U series. It'll be available on YouTube. I'll put it on Patreon first and then publicly on YouTube a few days after. But I'm going to start working on that because this is bothering me. It shouldn't be this way. If we just go back real quick and look at the anomalies and just focus on the Gulf real quick, you can see it is definitely quite a bit warmer than it should be in the Gulf of Mexico. And you might think, oh, does that mean we're going to have a really bad hurricane season? Well, the Gulf A is always warm enough for a really bad hurricane season. I say always. 95% of the time, the Gulf water temperatures will support intense hurricanes. It's more about current weather, upcoming winter storms, and the severe weather season. And just as a quick example, you get a nice big high sitting out over the western Atlantic over here, and the return flow around that high pumps the Gulf moisture into the southern United States, the Great Plains, Dixie, and beyond the Mississippi Valley. And you get these fronts that come in and troughs that dig in out of Canada, winter or spring, or even in the fall, as we saw mid-December there with that terrible tornado outbreak. Technically meteorological winter. But the bottom line is that warm Gulf is a true hotbed of energy and moisture for mid-latitude storms over the next several months, especially getting into severe weather season. I am pretty concerned about the potential, especially here in the heart of Dixie, as that warm water profile hangs on, and then maybe even for the traditional tornado alley over here once we get to April and May. We'll have to wait and see how things set up. But it's more than just hurricane season that intrigues me and kind of bothers me about this. Also, off the coast of the mid-Atlantic, at least here, these water temperatures have come down. There's 25 Celsius. Right in here we lost the 26 Celsius isotherm. Thank goodness. I mean, that would just be ridiculous. But that's still pretty warm compared to average here. 24, 25 Celsius. So upper 70s, mid to upper 70s Fahrenheit. If you jumped in a boat off of Charleston and went out just 100 miles or so and dove off the diving board of the small yacht or whatever, yeah, it'd be nice out there. Water temperatures would be about 78, 79 degrees. That's not bad at all. And even still, this gradient up here, the difference in temperature over distance, still not very significant, showing that the water temperatures are warmer than average. And that is finally going to start to matter here. I'll just zoom in and show you this too. Very warm compared to average here in the Northwest Atlantic. I mean, ridiculously warm, 4, 5, 6 Celsius above the long-term average. And that is going to matter when we get this significant storm that's going to develop and head up into Nova Scotia here over the next few days. I'm going to show you that in just a moment. We're getting ready to see a phenomenal bomb cyclone, as we call it. Just crazy terms we come up with as mere humans to label stuff. A very intense, non-tropical, low pressure, probably sea pressures in the 950 millibar range, the equivalent of a Category 3 tropical cyclone. We're going to see that affecting parts of the Gulf of Maine, and for our friends in Nova Scotia here over the next few days. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, as we transition out of the tropics into lower 48 weather for you real quick, by and large, the country is quiet in terms of weather. Got all sorts of other problems going on that at least we don't have to worry about the weather today on a big scale. That being said, it is still very much worrisome and bothersome and impactful, the weather that is in the Pacific Northwest, with flash flood watches and continued storminess in this area. Parts of the Great Lakes still enduring some winter weather, which is expected. That at least this is normal. This is what you would expect to see. And then the lake effect machine still going, and this is freezing spray advisory stuff going on here in and around Cape Cod. And let me just zoom in here to upstate New York. And darn it, I missed it. I want to click on that so I can get into Oswego out of the Buffalo area. So yeah, Lake Ontario and even Erie producing some lake effect snows, but especially downwind of Lake Ontario here, where we do have a lake effect snow warning special weather statement that was just issued a little while ago. I'm telling you what, I wish I was still up there. I have to admit, Pulaski, and I did some research, and people call it Pulaski, and they also call it Pulaski. They also call it Altmar, and they also call it Almar. It seems that either one people tend to say, whatever. But Altmar, Pulaski, that I-81, Highway 13, Highway 11, Lorraine, Mansville, Adams Center, that whole area between Syracuse and Watertown, generally no doubt about how to pronounce those areas, getting hammered with lake effect snow of 2 to 3 inches per hour. Ugh, I mean, if you haven't experienced it, it's really, really fascinating. I'm a weather geek. I love that kind of stuff. So I'm not there. I'm here at the office working on stuff. So this person is, though, Buried in Snow Bartman. And he tagged me while I was up there for that prior event. And so here we are. This is some video. I wish it was horizontal. That's my favorite, but I won't bang on people too hard for not making stuff as cinematic as I would like. At least we got some good video here from the Altmar area. Yep, I think he's staying at the lodge there, the Tailwater Lodge in Almar, however you say it. I've stayed there before. Look at that, man. 18 to 24 inches in that one little favorite area. Wow, just amazing, just amazing. All right, we'll back out of this. And let's see, I don't want that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So yes, the Buffalo area, their office very busy today with the lake effect warning. And, you know, again, it's not impactful on a huge scale, but impactful enough that I figured I would talk about it. So I got rid of that tab by accident. Let's go in here and get the Tropical Tidbit site going, because I want to show you the model here, the GFS, as we go out into the next few days. And I want you to keep your eyes on what happens here in the western Atlantic. We've got this incredible storm system that's going to develop. You can kind of see the trough here in the east through these thicknesses, what we call the thicknesses of the atmosphere, kind of like height lines. And then the ridging over the west, but enough storminess with a little bit of troughing in the Pacific Northwest that, yes, Seattle and areas just inland from there, the Cascades, down into parts of northwest Oregon, definitely getting wet, continuing on with the flooding, the high elevation snows, and that has been very problematic for that area. We don't want to forget about these small regional areas that have big impacts. But what's going to develop over the next few days is really going to be impressive. The jet stream is going to come in and get involved with that warm water of the western Atlantic and the temperature differences there. This is where we talk about this term baroclinic, that you have different features of pressure and temperature in the atmosphere working with each other, and these big contrasts that go on with temperatures in the atmosphere, pressures in the atmosphere, the warm Atlantic, convective processes, all of that get going, and you get a very intense mid-latitude non-tropical storm that has cold air at the center, wrapping warm convective process air, thunderstorms, that's what convection means, trying to transition eventually over to a tropical system if there was enough warm water. But there's not, because it's wintertime. So watch what happens. This is really neat. This is the surface map, basically, and this is the current time. We move this out into the future. There's 24 hours. Finally, the lake effect snows will abate for the most part by tomorrow. 48 hours out, pretty innocuous overall, not much of a stormy pattern, still wet in the Pacific Northwest. And then we get out to Thursday, and watch what happens off the coast here. We've got this trough re-amplifying over the east, low pressure developing down here, a baroclinic process. Again, it's the pressure in the atmosphere, temperature differences, not a tropical system where it's all derived by warm core, warm processes where thunderstorms release the heat. This is where the atmosphere is using, again, pressure differences in the atmosphere and temperature contrast. Very cold air coming down out of Canada, banging up against the warm air of the western Atlantic ridge. A very simple way to explain this. And so what happens is a complex, robust storm gets going. You see it develop there by Thursday. It rapidly intensifies as it moves northeast, with that trough being pretty progressive here, very sharp trough here, and it rides up the east side of it, 985 already by Friday morning, and it heads up into the Atlantic there, deepens to 973, and then it's knocking on the door of the Canadian Maritimes, Nova Scotia, at 956 millibars. Now make no mistake, on the west side of it here, screaming northwest winds, Maine, eastern New England, down, including, of course, Massachusetts, part of New England, Cape Cod, probably, it would be my guess that areas like Scituate in here, in vicinity, are going to see some really big waves coming in. I don't know why I went full screen, sorry. That's a little too much, Mark. Those northwest winds, northwest winds are going to really pile up the water there. So you folks up in Scituate, in those east-facing areas that are prone to those big waves, that fetch that comes out of the Gulf of Maine, Gloucester, where the sword fishing fleet is, made famous by The Perfect Storm, the book and the movie. Really, this could be impactful, and maybe even as far south and west as parts of New Jersey, the Virginia Capes, and the North Carolina Outer Banks. Something to keep in mind, that wind flow, and let's just back this up a little bit, that wind flow coming around that very intense storm will get going. So you're going to have, it's just about northeast there. You look at those isobars right here. That's about a northeast wind, roughly. I'm just kind of eyeballing it in there for you. And that's a pretty long fetch down the west side of this complex, almost double-barreled storm system. So even though there won't be direct impacts from snow, from rain, or whatever, we could see some high surf. I think we're coming up on a full moon here eventually in the next few days, if memory serves, and just the lunar cycle and the high tides of the month, etc. Yes, this could be impactful for beach erosion for a good deal of the East Coast. So that moves on in, and finally by day 5, another storm system dropping in out of Canada right there, bringing some more snow for parts of the Midwest. That digs around and tries, maybe, just maybe by day 6 and 7, some wintry weather for the Carolinas. We'll have to wait and see. That's pretty far out in time. And that one, too, tries to bomb out. Those baroclinic processes, again, temperature and pressure creating the storm, not the latent heat release of thunderstorm-related heat like we see in tropical storms. It's complicated, but that's what that means. So a week out could be kind of interesting. We will have to wait and see. So there you go. We're up to date now on all things related to some tropical stuff, some lower 48 weather, and again, that lake effect snow off of Ontario is just so neat. Too bad we don't have teleportation. That would be awesome if I could just go up there and maybe take some of you with me, and we hang out at the Tailwater Lodge there. I'm assuming that's where that gentleman is staying. That's where I was. It's like a Hilton Tapestry property or whatever. It's a nice wooden lodge. I think it used to be a school, if I'm not mistaken. It was converted over there in Almar, or Altmar, however you say it. No matter how you say it, it's a beautiful part of the country and an awesome part of the state of New York. All right, that is it from me. Have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again next week.